Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. For months, we've known that in Chhattisgarh, journalists, lawyers, and activists working to help Adivasis and expose the excesses of the police are targeted, harassed, vilified, and forced to leave. It was long believed this was done by an organization called the Samajik Ekta Manch. Last night, India Today TV proved the connection between the Manch and the Chhattisgarh police. This clearly suggests the Raman Singh government itself must be aware of what's happening, if not actually involved. The situation therefore breaches India's constitutional commitments as well as its guarantee of human rights. In a moment, we shall play the 10-minute story we broadcast last night. But after that, I will be joined by the social scientist Bela Bhatia, who was one of those targeted by the Manch, the former governor of Manipur, Mizoram and Jharkhand, Ved Marwa, a former member of the National Human Rights Commission, Satyabrat Pal, the National Secretary of the People's Union for Civil Liberties, Kavita Srivastav, and BJP spokesperson, Shazia Ilmi. But first, Bela Bhatia, I want to start with you and use your story as an illustration of the way journalists, lawyers, and human rights activists are treated in Chhattisgarh by the Samajik Ekta Manch. Describe to the audience what happened on a Saturday night in March when a group of some 100 men, women, and armed policemen in civilian clothes came to the village Parpa where you were staying.
Well, it was around 4:30 in the evening when, suddenly there was this long line of vehicles, something like around 10 vehicles, including jeeps and pickup, a few autos with around this 100 persons. And they came, and some of them, as you mentioned, some of them were also armed. And they came and they went to my landlady and they asked her as well as the neighbors that, why was a person like me who was a, Naxalite and Atangwadi, why had they rented out a room to me? And, they said that, persons like me should be ousted and, unko bhagao yahan se. Is tarah se unko pehle kaha. After that, they also had a whole pile of leaflets in which there was a photo of, my photo was printed on it. And, I had been called a Naxali Dalal in it. And they were distributing those leaflets. And later they took out a rally in the hamlet and they were shouting slogans like Bela Bhatia Murdabad, Naxali Bela Bhatia Bastar Chodo.
Now I believe the next morning you spoke to the Jagdalpur collector. What was his response?
Well, actually, that night itself I had informed him about it, and the next day when I went to meet him, I felt that he already had prior knowledge about the whole incident, and he did not seem too perturbed about it. So actually talking to him, I felt that what had happened in my village was part of a larger plan, which was supposed to be executed in the wards of the city by the Samajik Ekta Manch, and in villages where I lived by the Adivasi Ekta Manch and the Mahila Ekta Manch. And it was basically to alert people to outsiders like me, and that they should be wary of people like us, and we should not be allowed to live in these localities.
Okay.
So it was yeah.
Was this incident in any way a response to the fact that in November 2015 and again in January this year 2016, you helped expose 2 instances of gang rape and sexual assault by security forces conducting anti-Maoist operations in remote villages of Chhattisgarh? Do you think there's a link between what happened to you and the exposes you did?
Yes, I certainly. I mean, firstly, like whole of last year, in fact, there have been many instances of fake encounters in these regions. And in Dantewada, I have, along with other persons like Soni Sori, we have worked very consistently on exposing these fake encounters. Then late last year, along with members of the WSS, that is Women Against Sexual Violence and State Repression, it's a national network of women. And, we were doing an investigation in that region in Bijapur when
and you believe,
by chance
Ms. Bhatia, I'm interrupting. You believe that what happened to you on that Saturday evening in March was a retaliation and a response to your exposes. Do you believe that?
Certainly. I mean, I have no doubt about that.
Mr. Marwa.
Because this was the first instance of its kind when the amended rape law 2013, which allows for the indictment of the security forces, for crimes like rape.
Let me
this was the first time
let me stop you, Ms. Bhatia. You've
filed.
established what happened to you and the horrific trauma you were put through. You've established the response or lack of response from the collector Jagdalpur, and also you've established that you believe that what happened was a retaliation for your exposures. Let me bring you in, Mr. Marwa. You're a former very, very senior police officer. What happened to Bela Bhatia is unfortunately by no means unique. It's happened to lawyers like Shalini Gera and Isha Khandelwal, to activists like Malini Subramaniam, to journalists like Prabhat Singh, Alok Prakash Putul, Santosh Yadav, Samaru Nag. In each case, when excesses or abuses of power of the Chhattisgarh police were exposed, the Samajik Ekta Manch would be used to harass these people, to blackmail and vilify them, and then force them to leave. How do you defend that?
Well, I don't defend them at all. I think the senior officers of the Chhattisgarh police should investigate all these reports and take action against those officers who, if there is evidence that they were involved. Because what they are reported to have done is not only unethical, unprofessional, illegal, it's also counterproductive as far as the strategy to deal with the Maoists are concerned, these extremists are concerned. Because the more the police use illegal methods, the more public support they will get.
The critical point you're making is A, you do not defend this in any way, and you say that both as a very senior former police officer, you were after all Police Commissioner Delhi, and as a former governor of Mizoram, Jharkhand. And the second point you make is this has to be thoroughly investigated by the police.
Yes.
By the police. Are they the right ones to investigate it, or should an independent authority do that?
If I hope the senior officers are not involved in this, I give them the benefit of doubt. But if for the sake of credibility, if a special investigation team is required, then that should be constituted.
Shahzia Ilmi, yesterday evening this channel, India Today TV, established two critical facts. First, that the Samajik Ekta Manch was set up to specifically fill the vacuum left by the Salva Judum, which had been declared illegal by the Supreme Court and unconstitutional. And the second fact this channel established was that the Samajik Ekta Manch is facilitated by the Chhattisgarh police. There was a police officer actually using that word himself on air. And then that police officer went on to say that he and the police force were happy that people like Bela Bhatia, Malini Subramaniam and Shalini Gera had been driven away because the police regarded them as nuisances. And it's clear that this is therefore a thinly disguised government-sponsored operation, which clearly the Chief Minister must at least know about, and if he knows about it, then he's surely permitting it to continue.
Well, even you are using conjecture when you say that if he knows about. So it's not clear whether it is state-sponsored, whether really there is any complicity or a well thought out plan between the police and the state government to have such a unique NGO mechanism to ward off serious human rights activists. Nobody can condone what has happened, and I think there are a lot of wonderful activists out there who mean well. I don't think everything should be seen through a political prism, but to almost believe and connect the dots and extrapolate that indeed this is thinly disguised government of the state would be premature and uncalled for. I think there are wonderful NGOs out there who also spread awareness. We as a society stand for actually working against throwing out Naxalism. If you look at Raman Singh's government, see what it stands for the last many years.
I don't want to start talk about the Raman Singh government and Naxalism. I want to pick up, I want to pick up a point you made. I'll grant you the benefit of doubt that you want to claim, except I'll simply say it's so thin that most people would think it ought not to be granted. You're saying, and you're accepting, that the police force are involved with the Samajik Ekta Manch. What you're not accepting is that the government, the civilian government, is aware of what the police force is doing.
From the package and the...
I'll give you that benefit of doubt for theoretical reasons, but I will underline that most people would find it hard to believe that the Chief Minister isn't aware of and doesn't condone what his own police force is doing. But theoretically, That benefit of the doubt I'll grant you. Let me come to you, Mr. Pal. You've served for 5 years on the National Human Rights Commission. The India Today story that was broadcast last night has one of the founders of the Samajik Ekta Manch, a gentleman called Subba Rao, admitting that he is the author of the WhatsApp message defaming the BBC journalist Alok Prakash Puttal. That WhatsApp message then went viral and it forced the journalist to leave because of its defamatory content. Doesn't that admission that he is the author of the message clearly prove the Manch's role in harassing, targeting and forcing journalists out of Chhattisgarh?
Well, organizations like these, Salva Jodham and its successors, have been around, and I'm afraid they have been functioning in Chhattisgarh with official approval, with the blessings of the state government.
So Raman Singh would know about it?
I don't know if the Chief Minister himself would know about it, but certainly this is a well-considered policy of the state government.
So the first thing you're doing is you're creating question marks about the benefit of doubt that Shazia Ilmi claimed a moment ago.
The reason why I find it difficult to accept this is that in the clip that we saw, we heard one of the founders saying that they had set up these organizations under different names so that if one was banned, the other could take over. And one of the organizations he named, if you remember, was the Vikas Sangharsh Samiti. Now that was set up last year by Mahendra Karma's son as a declared successor to Salva Jodham in the memory of his late father, who, as you recall,
that itself establishes the link. Let me just take you back. When one of the founders of the Ekta Samajik Manch actually says that he's the author of a WhatsApp message that led to the hounding of a BBC journalist, he's clearly proving that the Manch is responsible for the hounding that everyone has believed they're responsible for. Now he's proven it.
Yes, and again, it's part of a pattern that we saw when I was in the NHRC, that unlike the state governments of, let's say, Jharkhand or Bihar or Odisha, which also have extremely serious problems with the extremists, the government of Chhattisgarh is sort of almost uniquely self-righteous. It believes that because it is fighting the Maoists, almost any means are grist to their mill.
One other thing, again on the film that we just saw, Sampath Jha confirms that Alok Prakash Puttal was targeted because Puttal was criticizing Inspector General Kaluri and he was criticizing the Chhattisgarh police. I'm going to quote what Sampath Jha says. When there is a personal attack on us, note that word us, then I also have the right to make a personal attack on the person who is attacking me. When Sampath Jha uses the word us, is he not establishing clearly a link between the Samajik Ekta Manch and the police?
Well, you know, they have. Certainly in our experience, we found that they acted more or less as proxies. I think that was a given. I don't think there is any pretense on this as far as the government.
In other words, as far as you're concerned, there was no need for Sampath Jha to prove it. You know that the two are connected.
That is the way they function.
Kavita Srivastav, in the case of the journalist Prabhat Singh, both the National Human Rights Commission as well as the New York-based Committee to Protect Journalists issued strong statements of deep concern. Your own organization, PUCL, said the following, and I'm quoting, "The police and district administration are trying to silence all journalists who are attempting to give any other version of events in Bastar other than the police version." Do you fear that Chhattisgarh is becoming some sort of police state?
I think it is a police state. That region, Bastar, is completely a police state. And there is actually what's happening. The hounding of lawyers is actually, you know, a breakdown of the constitutional mechanism. The hounding of journalists, lawyers, social scientists. What we are witnessing is a breakdown of the constitutional mechanisms. Please remember that even in the time of emergency, though fundamental rights are suspended, yet lawyers were continuously filing habeas corpus and other petitions. Our own former PUCL President Kanna Biran filed 400 petitions, and There was nobody who attacked him, hit him, beat him up. What are we seeing now? What were the lawyers? What was JAG-LAG doing? They were doing assuming.
Okay.
They were even taking up cases of
Kavita
Maoists.
Srivastava,
They were doing
in
bail.
all fairness,
They were doing
in
illegal
all
custody.
fairness, when you make that comparison with the emergency, I must point out that in the emergency something much worse happened, which mercifully and thankfully hasn't happened now. The Supreme Court in the Jabalpur case actually refused to accept habeas corpuses regarding right to life, and that's something that we haven't reached. So let's not go down the road of that comparison, because as a journalist
Okay,
you're forcing
Mr.
me to have to
Thapar,
say
can I
that,
finish?
and I don't want to deflect the discussion.
Can I just finish? Yeah, can I just finish?
Very
I was
quickly.
coming to the point. See, even despite of the suspension, people were filing. What we are seeing now, that access to justice is denied. That's my point.
Okay.
Under Article 32, you can go to any court. When you throw out lawyers, then you're preventing simple things like bail, torture, illegal custody. After all, their own data says that they arrested 522 Nakshals. Now, wouldn't they apply for bail? They're saying that 23 civilians
Kavita, let's not get bogged down in
weapons.
detail. Let's stick to the narrow story, which is horrible enough. I want to bring back Bela Bhatia, because Bela Bhatia is a living victim. So I'll come back to you in a moment's time. Let me go to Bela Bhatia, because she's a living victim of what happened. She is proof of the excesses. She is proof of the way the Samajik Ekta Manch, with the collusion of the police and perhaps the collusion of the government, are targeting people like her. Now, Bela Bhatia, in an open public letter that you wrote at the end of March, you say, and I'm quoting you, Adivasis are being caught in the crossfire between the government and Maoists. And you add, it is our right to expose the truth, ask hard questions, mobilize the masses, inspire them to break their silence, and protest within democratic limits. Any healthy democracy must not take away this freedom from its citizens. Am I right in saying that it's precisely that freedom which the Samajik Ekta Manch is squeezing with the collusion of the police and very possibly the collusion of the Raman Singh government itself? Although Shazia Ilmi has raised a doubt about that last one. But is it that freedom that is essentially a threat?
Yes, very much, and that is the worrying aspect. Because if the government, goes after an underground armed movement, okay, it's another thing, and it's a fight between combatants. But one would think that the government would in fact encourage, open and democratic forms of protest. But what we find is the contrary, so you go after those who are armed, you go after those who are unarmed. So basically, it's the right to dissent that you just cannot tolerate. You just want the people to take it. And all along, like in a place like Bastar, we see that, basic rights of people which are enshrined in this area, which is a 5th schedule area, important,
those
laws
are the
like
basic rights that are being breached. Ved Marwa, the bizarre bizarre part, Ved Marwa, is that not so long ago, Bela Bhatia was part of a group that studied Adivasi and Dalit alienation in Bastar for the Planning Commission. And one of the co-authors of the report that she and her colleagues submitted was none other than Ajit Doval. Today, he is Mr. Modi's National Security Advisor. So clearly, Bela Bhatia is not a rebel, she's not an insurgent, she's not a threat to India. But if this is how Bela Bhatia is treated, with contacts like Ajit Doval, what happens to other people who don't have those contacts and don't have that reach? They must suffer horribly.
I think government is taking a very narrow view of the problem of Naxalism. They think they'll be able to deal with it by dealing with this aspect of the problem. What if they have an integrated strategy? Then they should be looking at other things, social and economic development, or giving them social justice and economic justice.
But before we broaden and talk about how you should handle the Nakshals, come back to the question I asked. If Bela Bhatia, with her contacts, and she has links to Ajit Doval, the former National Security Advisor, can be treated in this way, what happens to people who don't have such contacts? They will suffer much worse.
Well, I hope not. I'm sure Doval doesn't know that This is what is happening in Chhattisgarh.
He certainly will after tonight.
Yeah, he will, but he's not
And
here.
actually, he would know it earlier because what's happened to Bela Bhatia and her connections has been written about. The Wire.in has had it. Several other websites like Scroll.in have had it. Maybe the papers have had it. So if Mr. Doval reads or if his office reads, he'd know.
Maybe not. His office maybe, because according to the media, he's in China today.
Well, today he's in China, but this story has been around for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, even longer.
Yeah.
Let me bring in Shazia Ilmi. Shazia Ilmi, not only does this whole sorry set of episodes, and as I said, it's not just one person, it's multiple people, not only does this whole sorry set of multiple episodes cast a terrible light about the Raman Singh government in India, it also casts a horrible shadow over Mr. Modi's attempts to project India abroad. It affects India's image as a democracy. It affects the way investors look at India, and it's likely to put them off. My question is simple. Do you think the Chhattisgarh government and the central governments realize what this is doing to India's image, or are they indifferent to it?
I think that, yes, there are 2-3 points I wish to make.
Go ahead.
There are 2-3 points that I wish to make. We just heard that about Bela Bhatia's contribution in making the report on the Adivasis of Bastar area, and that no one less than the present NIA has been part of it. So I don't think we should politicize everything. One. Two, as far as Chhattisgarh being an investment destination, 1.6 lakh crores had been invested. The ease of doing business is, Chhattisgarh is one of the 4 states. The fact of the matter is that we don't want people as Naxals. We want people as, we want the people there, Adivasis there, as electricians, as plumbers, as masons. They are in Dantewala. There is actually, for the first time in 2010, it was opened a livelihood college. Some great work is happening there. We have to be very clear about also the macro idea of what this government is doing.
The point I'm making, Shazia Ilmi, is that side by side with the great work you claim is happening there, there are some terrible things that are happening, and I'm simply asking you, those terrible things will cast Mr. Modi's attempts to sell India in a bad light.
Chhattisgarh is one thing to look at it as a BJP government, but public distribution system. I mean, just see the parameters and just see the accomplishments of Raman Singh's government is actually providing nutrition security, which he calls food security.
If you want to answer my question by talking about Raman Singh's PDS efforts, then that will suggest to the audience that you're not just deflecting, but you actually don't have an answer to the issue I raised. This is a strange way of responding to a terrible concern.
But there is also due diligence must be done in doing reports as to what the Maoists are doing, the destruction of public property, and what they're doing to the people of the region. There has to be
but by mistreating your own citizens who are innocent, you aren't helping the situation. You're underlining the reason why the Maoists are revolting, because you suggest to them they have good reason to revolt. Let me bring in Satya Bratpal. Can we lower the volume on Shazia Ilmi, please? Can we lower the volume on Shazia Ilmi? Satya Bratpal, I want to quote to you a recent article by Akar Patel. Akar Patel himself was quoting the Jagdalpur Legal Aid Group. He says the occupancy rate in Chhattisgarh jails is 253% compared to a national occupancy rate of 114. That's more than double. He says in Kankar, it's 428%, which is absolutely astonishing. Now, clearly, most of these people in jail are either political prisoners or some form of prisoners of conscience. You've been for 5 years a member of the National Human Rights Commission. How should this matter be taken up?
Well, this is the problem not only in Chhattisgarh but throughout India of overcrowding in jails, and most of them are people who should not be in jail at all. Simply people who do not have the ability to put up a bond for bail even when they've been granted bail. And that is particularly true in Chhattisgarh, because most of those...
So then how does this matter get taken up?
It's an ongoing process, it's an ongoing problem, and one of the services that the Jagdalpur Legal Aid Group was giving was to people like these who do not otherwise have any recourse at all to legal aid simply to get them bail, which is why they continue to rot away in jail when they don't have to.
Kavita Srivastava, I want to pick up on the point you just heard from Satya Bratpal, that in fact one of the critical things that the Jagdalpur Legal Aid Group did was to provide succors, support and help to people who end up in jail for no reason at all. Now, sadly, the Jadalpur Legal Aid Group has been forced out. And sadly, the lawyers who are working have been forced out. Many of the journalists who would report have been forced out. So now, in their absence, what sort of situation are the Adivasis left in?
See, absolute isolation of those who are looking for justice. It's access to justice which is being denied. I just want to bring in one more systemic input that can happen. Of course, the government is involved from the top level to about what is happening. I cannot understand why the High Court or the Supreme Court doesn't take suo motu cognizance of all this. For the most innocuous matters, cognizance is taken off. This is so serious. This is challenging life and liberty of people. Article 32, access to justice. I really think that we need all of them to come together.
You're asking why the High Court and the Supreme Court don't take suo motu notice. Maybe, and that's, I admit, a very good question. But what about your organization petitioning them? Leave aside suo motu, petition them. What happens if you petition them, or have you not petitioned the High Court and Supreme Court?
See, several petitions have been filed in various places, and at the moment there is an effort to take an all-party members of parliament to that region to see it for themselves. There should be a debate in parliament, and definitely the petitions which would be pursued. I mean, we have a petition.
But has the PUCL petitioned the High Court or Supreme Court?
Yeah, I'm telling you, the Chhattisgarh the Public Safety Act of Chhattisgarh was challenged by us in 2009 in the Supreme Court. They sent it to the High Court and it remains pending in the High Court. We have other petitions also. These are not being taken up very seriously. More than that, we have Linga who petitioned the High Court.
I'm stopping you, Kavita, because I need to go back to Bela Bhatia. Yeah. We're running out of time. Bela Bhatia, one last question. Have you taken up what happened to you personally, and what, in your knowledge, has happened to other journalists, activists and lawyers with the Chief Minister, Raman Singh, or with Home Minister, Rajnath Singh, or with the Prime Minister? Have you approached any of these three yourself?
No, we have not done that, but we have written and we have spoken in public forums.
No, but why haven't you taken this matter up with them directly?
Well, if you think, they will take suitable action, then certainly we'll do that. But, we have
how do you know they won't take suitable action unless you draw their attention to it? The element of doubt, whether it's worth taking it up with them, I'm saying to you, put the doubt aside and take it up with them. They are the Chief Minister, the Home Minister and the Prime Minister. They are your recourses when an injustice is or an excess is committed. Will you take it up with them?
Yeah, sure. We'll try all levels. I mean, we have also written to the United Nations. So it will. I mean, all
writing
levels,
to the United Nations is not a particularly helpful thing to do. The United Nations doesn't run this country. Yeah. Mr. Modi does. Mr. Raman Singh runs Chhattisgarh. Mr. Rajnath Singh is the Home Minister. Those are the people you should take it up with. You have access to do it.
Just 1 minute. 1,000 letters were sent to Mr. Raman Singh in a packet. They returned it back to the sender.
That is a very sorry state of affairs that they did that, but I'm asking Bela Bhatia in particular because, as I said earlier, she has a sort of contact with the
NS. Many people.
Can I speak to her, please, Kavita Srivastav? I'm asking Bela Bhatia in particular because she has a contact with the National Security Advisor. I mentioned it in an earlier question. She co-authored a report with him. She therefore has a line of communication. She can use it if she wants. Will you use it, Bela Bhatia? A quick yes or no, and I'll move on.
Yes, I would like to remind Mr. Ajit Doval that it is, we have to take a people-centric view of security and, not just, a state
Absolutely, but you can only remind him of that when you knock on his door to tell him. And that is what you need to do.
Yes.
Very quickly, because I'm running out of time, I want to ask the same question to both of you, and you have to give me short, sharp answers. Does this horrible set of episodes, because it's not just one story, shed a very poor light over India's democracy and our claim to be a modern liberal country? First, you, sir.
Well, we can't paint the entire administration and police in with the same black brush.
But you can paint Chhattisgarh, and is Chhattisgarh shown up badly?
Well, whenever such a thing happens, as I said earlier, it must be investigated, and those found guilty should be punished punished openly.
You retain a certain measure of loyalty to the police force, and I understand that.
But I'm coming to you. Difficult job to do.
Does this cast a poor light over India's democracy and our claim to be a modern liberal country?
Well, certainly it does cast Chhattisgarh in a very poor light, but that's sadly been the case for a while. But also sadly it's the case that it's water off a duck's back as far as
Water off a duck's back, it mustn't continue to be in the interest of our country, our democracy, our constitution and our people. And that is why I said to Bela Bhatia, you haven't taken it up so far with the government, you have contacts directly with Mr. Jeet Doval. I implore you to do it, because you will never know the outcome unless you knock on the door and try. Don't assume the answer will always be no. My thanks to all my guests for joining me. And on this rather sorry note, goodbye. Good night.
We're getting to hear that a slipper was thrown at Kanhaiya Kumar, this while he was speaking at the Dhanbade National College in Nagpur. Earlier, slogans were also shouted against Kanhaiya Kumar, and there was
already in 2001 with Wikipedia. You remember Wikipedia? This was a silly idea from the beginning. So people are going to, actually ordinary people are going to write encyclopedias. It's a stupid idea.